Hey everybody, Hard Reads Weeb here, and you heard it here first folks, Konami is going to ban MAXX in the OCG sometime in the near future. Now, MAXX has been around longer than some people playing this game, a fact that makes me wither every time I try to do research on cards for videos. But why would Konami finally ban the card after all this time? Well, we got some announcements and teasers of the newest OCG set, Infinite Forbidden. This set has a ton of new and powerful cards, but the most exciting one is Molt Chummy Perulia. If you control no cards in the field, you can discard this card to activate this effect. Every time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from the hand, draw one card. If you have 6+ cards in hand more than your opponent has on their field, randomly shuffle cards from your hand to the deck until that is equal. Now, as most of you have already noticed, this is just MAXX at home, and your home is North Korea. A powerful draw effect attached to a multitude of restrictions and limitations that make this card a million times worse than MAXX. The biggest restriction by far is not being allowed to control any cards on the field. This is huge, because the worst feeling in Master Duel on release was watching your opponent Drytron combo for the entirety of the Mesozoic era, and then right when you're able to normal summon Ojama Blue, your opponent activates MAXX behind 50 negates. When that happens, that makes me want to press the self-destruct button in real life, if you catch my drift. This only working on monsters summoned from the hand means that there are plenty of decks that can avoid giving a ton of advantage to your opponent. For example, Snake Eyes gives them Ash, Poplar, and then the rest are summoned from deck, graveyard, or the extra deck. But I also know for other archetypes, this card can absolutely mess you up. And if that happens, your opponent has to randomly shuffle away cards until the difference is 6 again. Ignister players will be going into time every game as their opponent has to draw and shuffle back 20 random cards in a game, so I'm excited for that riveting gameplay. One pro Molt Chummy has over the Earth Insect is the fact that it works on normal summons. You can shotgun this effect in the standby phase and at minimum have an upstart goblin even if they normal summon one time. So yeah, if you're a Fluanderies fan, you probably considered migrating to another card game right now. So why does this exist? Does Konami just print inferior garbage for the sake of filling up packs? The answer is yes, we've had Pot of Generosity in the game since the beginning. Sometimes Konami just likes to print awful cards, but this card isn't awful at all. In fact, it's one of the strongest hand traps I've seen in a while, which just goes to show how unbalanced the stupid cockroach is. I truly believe this is Konami's attempt to make a MAXX that is legal in both TCG and OCG. It's one thing for the format to be divided by being 6 months ahead of the other, but MAXX makes the game fundamentally different, and by different, I mean worse. There are a lot of videos explaining why. I will just link mine in hard legs if you want to see why everyone hates this card. I am confident in my belief that by the end of the year, MAXX will be banned in the OCG. That's my bold proclamation, and I've been pretty accurate in them so far. I talked about how Baron and Savage Dragon need to be banned, gone. I've talked about how Link Karibo and Summit Limit need to be banned, gone. When have I ever been wrong? Don't unban Colossus. Huh? But if you want to see more 100% accurate reads on the format, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We are on the path to 5K, and we're only going faster. Now, one thing that nobody seems to be paying attention to is Molt Chummy's final restriction clause. You can only use one Molt Chummy monster effect. Now, this might be the weird way the OCG has to rule this to prevent it from stacking, but why not you can only use this card's name once per turn? Why is only the first part highlighted? Almost like it's potentially an archetype of cards, not just a single one of. Call me crazy, but I think we might be getting a new wave of powerful hand traps, with their restriction being only one from their archetype can be activated per turn. Now, I know I'm assuming quite a bit now, but after Nibiru, we haven't gotten any new staple hand traps. We've gotten new board breakers and versatile cards that can go first or second, but not classic hand traps. With the banning of generic negates and potentially MAXX, perhaps we're entering a new age of Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to believe Konami is trying to make the game more interactive for both parties, as I think that's what's been holding Yu-Gi-Oh! Back for the longest time. Not just the complexity of getting into it, but how uninteractive games can be depending on what deck your opponent is playing. What supports my belief even further is the release of Vesper Girsu. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this was Orcus support, but nah. However, the effect is still really cool. If your opponent controls 2 or more monsters than you do, they can send as many of their own monsters they want to the graveyard. Based on how many are left on the field, one of these 4 effects resolves. 0, half your life points. If they wipe their own board, you become easy to OTK, I guess. 1, your opponent gains 2,000 life points. 2, banish your opponent's entire hand until the end phase. This is a really cool way of both giving you hand knowledge and preventing them from using any hand traps against you for the turn. This is a more clever way of doing it than just looping the card from their hand, as they can use it next turn if it goes that long. And if your opponent wants to keep 3 or more monsters, they cannot activate monster effects for the turn. This essentially forces your opponent at best case to end on 2 monsters. This can also get around any type of protection because it's your opponent choosing to send the monsters to the graveyard. Now, this card is quite similar to another popular board breaker, Evenly Matched. And in many ways, it's better, but in a lot of ways, it's worse. Let's do the pros and cons. Pro 1, it has applications going first. Evenly Matched is kind of risky to main deck, as it can only work at the end of the battle phase. However, with Vespa-Girsu, if you go first, you can set this card, and if your opponent summons 2 or more monsters to the field than you do, you can absolutely decimate them before they can establish their boss monster. This is most effective in decks focused around a towers, a singular monster with a large amount of protection. Typically, the way decks would out a towers is with White Woman Jump Scare, but this can prevent your opponent from getting enough material on the board to do so. First con is it only affects monsters. Evenly Matched is great at being able to obliterate end boards of not only some combo decks, but also control and stun strategies. If your opponent has a bunch of Floodgates and Runic Fountain on the board, they better have Judgment, otherwise they're going to lose this game to a single card. As they should. In comparison, Vesper-Girsu doesn't really hit the board nearly as hard. Getting rid of some monsters is not nearly as impactful, and it does absolutely nothing against back row decks. Pro 2, you get to keep your battle phase. Evenly Matched gives you an insane amount of board clearing, but you can't actually use that cleared board to win the game. At least in that turn. Having to start your turn on main phase 2 is quite the cost. You have to give up Battle as a tool of removal to deal with problematic cards, or Zeus to stop your opponent's board. You could do all of these things prior to Evenly, but when it resolves, it's not going to be very impactful. Meanwhile, Vesper can be resolved in the draw phase going second, meaning you can do this before your opponent has the chance to IP Masquerade their board for something like Apollosa, who also should have been banned. This card is a cancer on game design, but I've already made that video, go watch that if you want to know why. Con 2. Vesper sends the monsters to the graveyard. Now, for any older Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, this might not seem like a huge deal, but the graveyard pretty much just functions as a second hand these days. Tons of monsters have access to floating effects when sent to the graveyard. Even if they lose a lot of monsters to activate Vesper, it's not always going to be a big deal. Meanwhile, when banishing a card face down, that card is gone. That shit is like going to Brazil. It is incredibly difficult to get a card that is banished face down back into the game. Now, with all that said, I think Vesper-Girsu will be played, but only in specific decks. Towers decks that only keep up 1 to 2 monsters, and I can even see a deck like Sky Strikers trying it out. But I have decent hopes that this card will see some tournament play. But what do you think? Will any of these cards see meta play? Will MAXX be banned? Will I go a single video without complaining about something? Comment below, and thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. This is BreadBoyWeeb, signing out.